And the next thing we're gonna do is play with a simple behavior, so we understand how a behavior works and how to reuse the code in our tables. The behaviors as the components are the right place to reuse the code. If you find yourself doing something over and over, you can possibly move that piece of code into a behavior and use that behavior across several different tables. And also, if you find that behavior is useful, you can move that behavior into a plugin and also distribute the plugin so others, either you in other projects or the rest of the community, can use the behavior as well. We're gonna do an import feature where we're gonna import a CSV file of users real quick. And that could be the example code we're gonna play with. So the first thing is we're gonna bake a new behavior, import CSV on the newsletter plugin. So bin cake bake behavior import CSV. It was like that. Newsletter. We use the -p to define the plugin, so we create a class in the right place. So now we have a new file here under plugins newsletter model behavior import CSV behavior, and we can create this function inside a behavior. The behavior will work as a mixin. So any table that is loading this behavior, or we add this behavior to, will also use those functions as their own. Okay, we will add those functions to the behavior. Also, the behavior can have callbacks that will interact with the table we attach the behavior to. Okay, we're not gonna go over that today, but you can think about behaviors that are going to affect some model, like a soft delete behavior that we were playing with yesterday, and well, any other behavior you like. So if we go here to the new import CSV behavior, we see it is pretty empty class, and we can just add a new function. We will pass a file name to it. We're not going to go through the burden of uploading a file and then using the temp name or whatever. We're just going to pass a file, but you see is not hard to think about uploading a file as well. So we upload a CSV of users and then import them. We need to import a couple classes, and I think we're done. Okay, so we will need a create entity function here as well. Like this and that. So this behavior will use a file name as a parameter. We'll check if the file exists. Then for each row of the file, read as CSV, we will create a new entity, put that in a users entity array, and call save many. So we will save all the users or no users at all. The create entity will match the field coming from the headers, because we will define the first row of this file as having the headers, and we will match the headers of this file with the columns of the users in the database. So we will have a file like this one to import. Let's create this file here, vi users.csv. And we have a first row with the headers. All the headers will be matched against the fields in the database. So we have a first name, a last name, an email, and a locale. Then we have all the data in the rest of the rows. Okay. Possibly we will not import anything because those fields, those records already exist. So I'm going to delete them. And I'm going to add a test function for this in the users controller. Like this. Here. Gonna create a new function, import. I'm gonna call users import. I'm gonna pass a file, users.csv. I'm gonna debug the results and render false. So if we go here, users import, we will get users controller import. Typo? Sorry? Yeah, I tried that. It's already saved, I think. Newsletter controller, users controller import, public function import. Users import. Oh, you're right. Sorry. I forgot one important piece of this example, that is we need to attach the behavior to the table. But this is no. Why if I do this? It should work, right? Okay. As unknown method, no missing action. So yeah, you're right. Get out here. And cool. So what's the missing piece? We need to remember to, or I need to remember to add this to the table as well. So we're adding the behavior to the users table. Like this. And we need to, no, this is not the one. Users table. Okay, this is the one. We need to add the behavior like this. Okay. After we attach the behavior to the table, then we have a new import method available that we can use from the controller. Okay. So we try this again. We get false. And we get false because those users already exist. So let me delete them. This one out and this one out. Let me try to import them again. And now we get them imported. Okay. Well, do you think Well, there is a possible improvement that is using the configuration to change the way that this behavior works. For example, we could set up a delimiter and use, instead of comma, whatever other delimiter for the CSV we want. There are other improvements that we could think about this code. For example, what would you suggest? What do you think it could be a good improvement?
Does it fail if just one user is double?
Yeah, that could be a good improvement. Another improvement could be if it fails, I don't know which one is failing. I'm just getting a save, a false. So it is just one or nothing. I would like to know which one of the users in the CSV is not correct, so I can manually go back to the file and fix it and then re-import the whole file, possibly. In this case, instead of using save many and just let it work, I would be possibly interested in managing saving each of them, so I can record the specific failure validation errors to the line and match it with the line of the CSV. So I can say something like, oh, in line 5, the user is missing an email, or line 10, the email is duplicated. Please fix it so I can import the whole register. Okay. Well, a lot of other improvements. I understand there are already plugins out there for importing and exporting CSV or XML or things like that. This is just an example to have something to put there as a behavior and talk about that. But you get the idea. If we attach this behavior to any other model in any other table in our application, we will be able to import things using a CSV file. Okay. Cool. Any questions related? Yep.
Why is it better to use a behavior instead of a trait?
It's not better. You can use a trait instead. In this case, the behaviors add you a couple nice features, like the way to have callbacks in them, so they are naturally called in the workflow of any operation in the table itself, and also the way to initialize and pass configurations to the behavior instead of a trait. The trait is good if you just need to add a function as it is to the model. That's fine to use a trait. If you need some more things provided by the framework, maybe a behavior or a component is a better option. Any other questions? Yep.
Would you just do this kind of operation in background job?
Of course, yes. Thank you for the question. This is obviously a very bad example for doing in a request context, because you could have 1 million users in the CSV, and you will get either an out of memory exception or a timeout exception because it's taken too long. So this operation, it does not make sense to have in a controller. Okay. So controllers, we're gonna do a quick introduction, talk about components and specifically one component. So the controllers, the controller classes extend app controller. They have an initialize as well, where you can configure things, and also in the before filter callbacks. We have a load model function that we can use to get a reference, read the table class and also create a pointer to it in the current context. We can affect the views using set or render. We already use render to render nothing. And we can change the flow control using redirect. Always remember to use arrays for the URLs. So in the future, If you need to change the URLs in your application and you're not using URLs, is much harder because you will need to go through your code and do a search and replace with all the funny side effects that this could happen. This could do in the application. If you use always URLs as arrays, you have the router and you can configure different endpoints for those arrays or those configured URLs later on. The controllers, they have callbacks as well, like before filter, before render, and after filter. I think I never use after filter for anything, but it's there if you, in case you need it. Before filter and after and before render are the most I use personally. Before filter is executed right before the action itself, and before render is executed after the action is executed, but before the view is rendered. So it is a good place to inject things for one specific view or alter the way the template is displayed, whatever. Yep.
Yes, there's like one thing that could be maybe added, and that's you specify redirect URL. It would be good that you can cross HTTPS or not. We had this use case where, because of many reasons out of control, users were able to come via HTTP and not via HTTPS, and we had to force HTTPS, and it was not possible to do that with the redirect URL the way it is. So do you know a workaround maybe that we could, because at some places we did have to hardcode a few redirect. So do you know a workaround for that maybe?
Yeah, I know a workaround that is configuring your web server, so it redirects to HTTPS.
But you couldn't do that.
You can't. Okay.
That was it, and we can
Yeah,
do
yeah.
something about it. So
Understood. Yeah.
I think is it possible?
A cake workaround for it could be, I don't know, for example, using security component, require secure, and then in the black hole callback, redirect to the SSL version of,
Black hole would do it.
yeah, that could work. I try to do these tricks always in the web server, if possible, because I like whatever lands on CakePHP is the right thing. I think the web server is the right place for this kind of
You are
tricks.
totally right, it's just like
Yeah.
sometimes it's gonna be out of
Sometimes you
control
can't.
and-
Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe the web server admin is just away on vacations or something, and you need to do it. Okay. Or he's a damn. Okay. So cool. So you can use components and helpers. Using components is like load component in the controller. We're using helpers. You need to go through the view builder class and then attach the helpers you want to it. Or if they are application-wide helpers, there is an app view class that you can use to load all the helpers you want to load in the application. We can get through it as an example later if you want. I don't want to stop here because there is no example and I want you to type something. Quickly talking about the request and the response objects. In the context of the controller, you will be using the request and the response. Basically, those two are wrappers for the HTTP request and response. They have added features like accessing the params coming from the router, accessing the query, accessing the data, all with functions. If you use those functions, they will fall back to null if the key does not exist, which is always a good idea. You can also retrieve the whole data array and then do whatever you like, Cake 2 style. But I would recommend to use the functions instead. Then you can use many detectors added for the request, like post, get, ajax, mobile, etc. You can add your own detectors. If you have an application that uses this frequently, you can just configure a new detector and use it as is detector if you need it. And then you can access a session. Keep in mind the session helper and component are deprecated. So the right way to access the session now is through the request object. This request session function, and you get the session. You can read things, write things, do anything you need to session through this entry point. Then you have the response object. In a similar way, the response is a wrapper to the HTTP response that we are going to send back to the browser. We have a lot of functions there we can use to modify how the response is going to be generated. For example, we could change the headers of the response, add a specific header, change the status code. If we don't want to return 200, we could return any status code we need. This is especially useful in API development, where you want to be very picky about the status code you want to return for specific actions. Then we could control caching using expires, for example. So we'll let the proxy or the end browser know that one specific action can be cacheable, or it's nice to be cached. So it will expire in 1 hour. So you don't need to get back here to get the same results in 10 minutes. You can disable auto caching. You can use file to inject a file in the response and then use download true to force a download. Or you could just get the file contents, put the file contents on the body, and return the response if you need to do so. Okay. Any controller action that returns a response object will not render any view. It will just get the response and send it back to the browser. So if you need to do something quick, you don't need to any template. You just need to send some body and some status code. You can wrap that in a response, do return response, and you don't need to create a view or anything. Okay. And now components. You can load the components using load component in the initialize or, well, in the initialize of or before filter maybe, but for the app controller or the controller you want to use the component, you have a lot of core components like Flash, Cookie, Auth, security. We did use Auth yesterday for doing a quick example for logging in and using those fallback passwords, etc. Then we have security, CSRF components, request handler, paginator, and the ACL component that was moved to a specific plugin under CakePHP umbrella. Okay, so we're gonna do a quick example with security component. I understand everybody knows about security component or uses security component somehow. This component is useful if you have a form-based application and you want to block standard attacks that any end user wants to do against your application, like, for example, form tampering. Example. We have users here. We can edit a user. Imagine that you're editing your own profile and you say, there is a user I'm editing. Possibly they will have a role somewhere. And I will be role user, but I want to be role admin somehow. What if I add a hidden field there with role admin and send it back to the server? Will they buy my my post and change my role to admin, maybe? Well, this is not going to happen if we add the role to the list of accessible false fields in the entity. Because remember, we have accessible property at the entity level. We could define the list of columns or fields that we want to trust coming from the user land and merge and build into an entity. If we say role false, we will never merge the role, even if it is injected. So this could be an option to, obviously, is a good idea to add role to the list of the non-accessible fields. But also, we don't want people sending us things that we didn't create in the form. We don't want people changing the fields in the form, and we don't want people changing the hidden values that we put in the form, because this shouldn't be allowed. And this is something that security component is going to do by default automatically. So for example, if you go here to users, controller, edit, okay, we get the user with an ID. If request is post, we patch the entity, and we want to take a look at the entity itself. User and die. Okay, so if we get here and we save this, we get this, okay, everything good. If we get back and we get to the form and we do this and change the email, we're gonna change it and wanna use other thing. Okay, and we're gonna send it. So we have thing here, okay, which maybe we don't want. So what we're gonna do is use the security component. So we get back, we get to the controller. We could do it at the app controller level. We can do it here if we want. We can just do it here. And using, let's say, initialize, I have the code around. Like that. Okay, so we are loading a component that is a security component. And now, if we go back here and load this page, okay, if you take a look at the page itself, you will see that there is some extra information that is added by the form helper when the form helper generates this form, like some tokens and some data there that will help us to detect if something changed when we post this form back to the server. So now if we go here and say this name is thing, and submit, we get that. We get an unexpected thing and a missing email. And the request is and we get an auth security exception for this specific form post. Okay, so it is like a first barrier of defense for form tampering and other attacks that the user could be doing against your forms. Okay, anyone here was not aware of security component before?
I have a deeper question.
Okay.
In the template, I'm adding the entity into this form create.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't, will security component still work?
I don't think so, but we can try. So we have an edit template. under users. No. Users. Delete this one. So you mean what happens if I do this? I get that, and well, obviously I don't get any data because I'm passing an empty thing. So let me try to do some data here. Yes. Security, submit. So it gets to the controller. What happens if I edit again and change something like this? Thing name. This thing. Spanish. That happens. So the answer is yes. The only difference is, obviously, you don't get the request data in the form, so you don't get the previous values, field, and those. But yes, the token is generated and you get it back. It doesn't matter if you set an entity or not to the form. This happens in form, and there is a secure method there that generate the tokens and put it there. Yep.
I have a question. We had the discussion. How would you deal with AJAX requests and security component, and with the hashing of the forms?
Yeah. I don't like to handle AJAX and security component, so no one likes. So, so what I do is to ensure that there is an extra layer on top of my AJAX endpoints. So I double check all the inputs, and I ensure that every input has the right type and they are kind of sanitized if not. And I block it if I see something rare or weird there at that point. But I don't use security component in AJAX.
Okay. Other question, security component and tests.
Mm-hmm.
When I write tests, I came up to the conclusion that CLE, there is a way to define for the test when the fixture data gets into the test class and gets the procedure. Sometimes I run into issues that he tells me that it's the test action can't be accomplished and can't be finished because he black holed it.
Yeah.
It's implemented and it's very curious and I don't understand why.
Yeah. I've seen this in integration tests when